And very pleased to have in the studio with me Greg Palast, the world famous investigative reporter, BBC, Rolling Stone, everything. You've reported for pretty much every really high quality, cutting edge news site on earth, Greg.
Yeah, that's been my problem. But I've done the quality stuff, but I wouldn't mind slumming it, the New York Times or the Washington Post, just so I can get my words. As you can tell, I'm not Henry Higgins, and I've been exiled mainly to Britain for BBC and The Guardian.
It's remarkable because I remember in 2000 when Jeb Bush ordered 40,000 African Americans knocked off the voting rolls so that his brother could get within 500 votes of stealing the election. You reported that for BBC. Everybody in Europe knew what was going on. Everybody all around the world knew what was going on. There was a complete blackout on it here in the United States.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
Well, I found that Jeb Bush and Catherine Harris had removed tens of thousands of black men from the voter rolls. I'm not making that up. I knew that they were black because on the Florida voter rolls, if you're black, it says BLA. Took me a while to figure. Believe it or not, I know it sounds like I'm dumber than a brick, but I kept saying blah blah blah. Why are all these people called blah blah blah?
And then you figured it out.
Yeah. That's why I'm an investigative reporter. See, if I don't wear my hat, I can't do it.
Yeah, it keeps it all in.
So I have to keep the hat on all the time. But but then it was like page one, literally in The Guardian, top of the nightly news in Britain, and because BBC, it's all over the world except where it bounced off the electronic Berlin Wall to stop the word.
Weird.
It was how Bush won the presidency by swiping it by this racial lynching by laptop.
That was done in Florida in 2000,
right. So
in the months before the election. And it's amazing how, if something, it's like in China, the news about Tiananmen Square, I mean, they've managed to scrub that from the memory banks, and we've scrubbed this from your own reporting for the BBC from our memory banks.
Yes, and then I even, there's also one that really got buried, but again was on top of the nightly news in 2004. A trick called caging that they used. They would send black soldiers letters saying, "Hi, hello from the Republican Party." Now they didn't, they don't expect these black soldiers to vote for them. They do expect the letters to come back as undeliverable because they're in Iraq. They say, "Do not forward," and to their voting address. You can, if you're in Iraq under a Humvee, if you're in Fallujah,
your email's
you're still an American citizen who can vote, even if you're, if you're trying to avoid IEDs. So they knocked off all these voters. Anyway, that's how Kerry, in the end, that was one of the big pieces about why Kerry lost the presidency, because that killed Ohio, with other things I uncovered. And Kerry himself, by the way, what's this whole thing where no one complains about the American elections, that they're unfair? Kerry said I was right. And
George W. Bush sued Al Gore. At the Supreme Court. I mean,
to preempt him from demanding a real count of the vote.
That's
and
right.
So and Gore knew about the black voters too before the count was over, being wiped out. But so what I have to do is I have to sneak. Here's my thing. So to get stuff into the U.S. news, I have to sneak it in. One, I can go on Thom Hartmann, and I'm not laughing because thank God, God bless the stations listening to this, but I do things like I've made a Saturday morning cartoon about the theft of the election in Florida with Jeb and Catherine Harris as cartoon characters, and so that I put it in my film. I have a film.
Which I want to get to.
Yeah.
First, before we start, though, I probably should have opened. The Bundy brothers, Eamon and his brother, were acquitted in Oregon. This is big news. They're still facing some charges having to do with their dad's efforts down in Nevada, and so they weren't released from custody, but they were acquitted, which apparently, if you're armed and white and you take over federal property, that's considered First Amendment.
That's a protest.
Yeah, that's a protest.
Can you imagine if Black Lives Matter, taking over a government property, taking over a police station?
Well, it doesn't even have to be Black Lives Matter. Here is a clip from a call that we got yesterday, live from Standing Rock.
Oh, yeah.
Here, listen to this one.
The police are coming right now. I see the riot police north. They're marching towards us with shields, with batons, with helmets. They are pushing people back from the north on Highway 1806. They're surrounding us. Literally, I see them in front of me, and to the left of me, and to the right of me. And so that's what's happening. It's really chaotic, and this is right now.
Yeah, and that was right now. That was then. That was yesterday, and arrests, pepper spray. One person was tased right in the face, got a hook, a barb in right next to his eye. Somebody else got dragged out of a medic a Native American medic was dragged out of his car, and the car was still running. Somebody else had to jump in the car and stop it from hitting a bunch of people. I mean, this was serious stuff. Apparently, and this is land that was given to these folks by treaty in the 1860s, and they never gave it up.
Well, in fact, that's one of the things that I have been investigating is well, not only pipelines, but you can't take away people's rights and people's land and crap all over their land with hydrocarbons.
Apparently you can't.
Unless you take away their vote. And I'll have you know that at the highest, dig this, if you are a black person, the chance that there'll be some technical reason why your vote doesn't count is 900% higher than if you're white. But if you're an American native, it's 2,000% higher than if you're white. There's no group that suffers more vote suppression, election theft, election rigging as victims than Native Americans. I saw this at the Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico and all over the place because both parties are hitting them because it's not Republican or Democrat, though about 95% of American natives vote Democrat. It's mainly them versus the 1% that wants their land. It's never changed. It's never changed, except instead of, cowboys with 6-shooters driving them off the land, it's elections officials who scrub their votes.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So to your and by the way, Greg is going to be with us for the hour. We've got another 45 minutes with Greg in the studio. So if you have thoughts, if you've got if you questions you want to ask, one of America's premier investigative reporters, give us a shout and we'll put you on. But before we hit this first break, you've got this new movie. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I have a movie which is based on the latest investigations for Rolling Stone. It's called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, A Tale of Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. And it's a documentary in the sense that it's nonfiction. It's in the documentary category for the Academy Awards. But it has Shailene Woodley, Rosario Dawson, Willie Nelson, Ice-T, Richard Belzer, Santa Claus, that's Ed Asner. And we have, as I said, we have cartoons. I got the guy who drew Who Framed Roger Rabbit to do cartoons throughout this thing. So I'm telling you the story of the corrosion, destruction, and theft of the American election, this November's election, coming week's election.
So you get to see what's going to happen. What you're going to read in the news 2 weeks in advance.
In advance, you get to see how they're going to swipe it because when Ronald Reagan, I was about to say, in his dreams, when Donald Trump says the election is rigged, he knows because his buddies are rigging it. And I'm actually you watch me in real time, investigate this for Rolling Stone, because he's been saying this for 2 years. So I started this investigation. I'll tell you how they're going to do it on the other side of the break.
Yeah. And it's an amazing story. And nobody can tell these kind of stories like Greg Palast. So Greg Palast is in the studio with us. His website, gregpalast.com. You can tweet him at Greg Palast.
Greg Palast.
At Greg Palast, Palast. Very straightforward. And we'll be back with the story of how our election is rigged right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And Palast is with us. His website, gregpalast.com. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Christopher in Ocean Park, Washington. Hey, Christopher, thanks for watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You're on the air with Greg Palast and me. What's up?
Hey, that's a great honor to talk to Greg Palast. Hello, sir.
Hi.
You once mentioned, I believe on Democracy Now!, that you were sent copies of George Bush's emails that all got deleted. I was wondering if you still had them and planned on releasing them.
Yes, they are from Karl Rove's emails. He's famous actually because he doesn't have a computer. So he used his assistant Tim Griffin, who is now Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas, and
Really?
but that was his hitman, his dirty trickster. Tim Griffin, supported big time by the Koch brothers. Anyway, but
Was he involved in putting Don Siegelman in prison?
yes, Directly involved. Yeah. Absolutely directly involved. And this guy, anyway, so Rove sent out a bunch of emails titled Caging. Caging, and I didn't know what that was, except they were attached to a bunch of Excel files, spreadsheets. Yeah. And what we found out is that what they were doing was sending, this is what I talked about in before the break, which is that the GOP was sending hundreds of thousands of letters to people at homeless shelters, soldiers sent overseas, and black colleges during summer break with first class or registered do not forward saying, hi, welcome the voter from the Republican Party. And what they did was then when that letter, of course, the soldiers are overseas, the homeless don't always get their mail, the students are away on vacation. And when the letters came back to GOP, they said, oh, these are ghost voters, right? Voter fraud. They don't exist. They're not really living at that address. And they had their votes wiped out. And the soldiers didn't even know it because they'd send in their absentee ballot from Iraq or Afghanistan, and it would be disqualified. And Florida, for example, didn't even tell them. It was all over Florida, Wisconsin, Ohio. They were using this to pull these states, especially in 2004. It's a violation of the Voting Rights Act of 65. The criminal section still exists, the Voting Rights Act of 65. And it's also a violation of the GOP's consent decree not to jack with the elections.
Which goes back to 82, as I recall.
And so how we got people say, how did we get the emails? GeorgeWBush.com was used by Rove and the GOP committee chairman. And a friend of mine set up a catch site called GeorgeWBush.org. And some of the emails were accidentally routed to ORG. If they wrote ORG, the whole pile came in.
Wow.
So I had 50 of these sheets. I had the names of the actual people whose votes were eliminated.
Wow.
And I will say that the Democratic Party, which is usually a deadhead, they usually don't do much to protect voters, to be honest. That's a whole other discussion. But in at least Florida, they had gone into to enjoin them using these lists.
That was in part.
By the way, that's in the film. I have that.
This is in tonight's movie?
Yes, it's in the movie, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Bobby Kennedy explains it all, my co-investigator.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, we'll be right back. Greg Palast in the studio with us. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 21 minutes past the hour. We're talking with Greg Palast. Okay, Greg, you got this movie. It is playing tonight, tomorrow night. In fact, tomorrow night.
All week it's going to be playing in premiere in Washington, D.C. with some of your RT friends like Lee Camp and yourself Saturday night. Yep. But also, I know that KPFT in Houston is listening in. Guys, that's next Thursday. I'll be there for the premiere in Houston, and it's going to be playing all over the country. But the big thing is, I talked to the distributor. They went kicking and screaming, but they agreed because of the election that you can now stream it or download it dirt cheap on like $2.99 on Amazon.
Oh, cool.
So you can actually get it starting right now. The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, A Tale of Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, so you can learn how Donald Trump's buddies are stealing the election. It may not be enough for him, but I'm going to tell you right now, North Carolina, Ohio, Arizona, we're talking about the United States Senate in the balance, and this is the trick that could keep the Senate in GOP hands.
And by the way, my theory on why this is so important to them is that the oldest and most frail members of the Supreme Court right now are Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Kennedy, two liberal votes. And if they actually follow through on the thing that both Karl Rove and I think Ted Cruz have said now, we're not going to allow any new nominees from a Democrat to the Supreme Court. Right now we're at 7. That could take the court down to, or at 8 rather. That could take the court down to 7 or down to 6. But if either one of those two liberals were to resign, immediately you've got a Scalia conservative court again, with Justice Thomas and Justice Roberts arguably being the most powerful, and Alito. And we could be back in the Lochner era. I mean, they could knock down child labor laws. They could, it's insane what they could do, and that's what I think they're going to do.
Exactly.
So tell us why.
So here's how they're going to do it. Now, pay attention to this one. It's okay. people are not listening to Trump's full phrase. He says the election's rigged, but then he says, because he has several variants, but it all says people are voting many, many times. Right. People are voting more than once. And he mentioned the Pew Trust, and no one picked up the reference. Pew has said that there are 24 million people who are registered in 2 states because they've moved or something. You know, they're not voting twice. But what Trump's people are saying is they are voting twice. Now, if this is just Trump talking through his Cheeto-flavored hair, who would care? But the problem is 30 Republican secretaries of state, and this began long before Trump came on the line. He's just parroting them. Before Trump came on the line, they are claiming that there are 7.2 million Americans, or 3 million Americans voting twice. So they have a list of 7 million Americans, this blacklist, this secret blacklist. Now, you know from the hat that I'm an investigative reporter, so that I got my hands on the list. I have the millions of names that they say are people who voted twice. Why does it matter? Because they're taking away their vote. Now, if you vote twice, Tom, you go to prison for 5 years. But they're doing something interesting. They're not charging anyone with a crime. They've arrested 2 people in the entire United States. But they're removing...
One of them was a guy from France who voted Republican.
Yeah. Austria, actually.
Austria.
Later and the whole thing. He's a registered Republican. So they've, and the only other guy arrested for double voting was a Republican too. But that's besides the point. It's basically a crime that doesn't happen. But they're removing people. Now, if you rob a bank, you go to prison, right? They don't close your bank account. Here they're saying, we don't need any evidence. We don't need anything. We're just wiping people off the voter rolls. Now, the NAACP, Reverend Barber, has sued in North Carolina because people are mysteriously disappearing from the voter rolls. There's no mystery. Yeah. They're disappearing because of this system of calling people double voters, and they don't notify you. They don't say your registration has been canceled because you voted twice. And here's the thing, Tom.
I'm listening.
The list is overwhelmingly voters of color. Now, are these people guilty? I mean, after all, maybe they are guilty of voting twice. Well, here's an example. Maria Hernandez voted in Georgia, and Maria Hernandez voted in Virginia. Now,
she got on a plane and went back and forth.
Or you could say absentee ballot, but whatever. But they're saying it's the same voter. Now, you might say Maria Hernandez is a common name, but not for Republican. Okay? Now, in my film, I go and find Maria Hernandez, and she admits it. Now, she votes. Now, according to the Republican hit list, Maria Isabel Hernandez is supposed to be the same voter as Maria Cristina Hernandez. So I thought it was phony until I met Maria Hernandez, who said, yeah, that she really did vote 2 different times. Changed her middle name and all that stuff, but it's still the same voter. And what? Yeah, she totally confessed the whole thing. She said, in fact, she said that Hispanics choose names when they're born, which are very common just for the purpose of being able to get around the voting laws.
You're being sarcastic, I hope.
Well, it turns out it was Rosario Dawson putting me on.
Oh,
it was Rosario Dawson, who's also
in the movie.
Besides being a terrific actress that you've seen in Sin City, she's the founder of Voto Latino, and she is seriously mad about this system. So you have people named Maria Hernandez, James Brown, Jesse Jackson, Harold Washington, and if you're Asian American and your last name is Kim, goodbye to your vote in Georgia.
Or Lee.
It's Lee Kim Park Ho. Yeah. Forget it, man. Yeah. And so we're seeing this mass wipeout of voters of color. 41,000 swing state of Virginia, when the Republicans controlled it, the Democrats just took it back, but they haven't reversed any of this. North Carolina, 35,000, maybe 100,000 by Election Day removed. No notice to you. No chance, you're dead. And Ohio, the super swing state, 50,000 people removed so far, and no evidence. They haven't arrested a single person in North Carolina, but they're stealing this election by wiping out double voters, who all happen to be minorities.
Literally millions of them.
Millions on the list. About 1 million will find their registration gone on November 8th. So
people will show up to vote, and they won't know until they show up to vote. And even then, they probably won't know. They'll just think, oh, must have been a mistake.
And the little old lady behind the desk doesn't know why you're listed as inactive or you're simply missing.
Amazing.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with your calls for Greg Palast right after this. GregPalast.com. He's in D.C. You can read all about it on his website. Stick around. We'll be right back.